How do we know? Are they giving us the wrong answers? Or are we not asking the right questions? Hey everybody, Ashley here with the right questions. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we have an interview with Sargis Sangari. He's going to be on here in a moment. Before I add him to the stream, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that today has been kind of emotional for me, wanting to do things to help the officers in Philadelphia. One of them was very badly injured. She was hit by a truck. She has a broken leg. She's stable. She's going to live, but she definitely suffered some injuries. There were some other injuries that were suffered that were very bad, and none of this should be happening right now. So as usual, because I support a nonprofit, I'm going to have that ticker running across, but it's going to be in conjunction to another fund that's starting. We're trying to get enough money so that we can actually go to Philadelphia and actually give those proceeds to the officers who were injured and needed them, and be able to help however we can in Philadelphia while we're there. So this is one that's really close to my heart. It has a mission. So anything, like you said, that anybody gives proceeds wise to the nonprofit, when you see the ticker come up, that's what it's going to be going for. So I'm going to get that ticker going, and here we go. Yeah, we see it. And get us back to the comments. So again, you guys know the comments are always on. So we'll have those while we're doing the interview. And I'm going to bring Sargis in, and we are going to start. So here we have Sargis Sangari. Thank you for joining us, Sargis. Please tell us a little about yourself and about your run for office.
Thank you, Ashley, for having me here. First of all, yes, our prayers are with the officers in Philadelphia and all the officers that are serving this nation, not only through the COVID crisis, but what is happening currently with the unrest that are being really fueled by the politicians that constantly use this for their benefit. So hopefully we can make a change over the next 7 days. So my name is Lieutenant Colonel Sargis Sangari. For those who do not know me, I'm the Republican nominee for the U.S. Congress in the 9th Congressional District of Illinois. And I'm hoping that come November 3rd, I'll be beating the incumbent here and actually getting into Congress to try to make these changes that are going to bring peaceful tranquility to our streets again. I know, Ashley, you and me have been working on the Back to Blue event support and the support of our police officers. And if it wasn't for you really starting this program nonprofit, none of us who are running today across Illinois would have had an opportunity to really express our opinions using the type of a format and platforms that you have created. So with that said, our prayers are with the men and women of blue, and we hope that we could get in and make some needed changes to support them.
You and Tom always try to make me cry. It's a thing with you two. I'm telling you, you like to do it.
That's our job.
So, but thank you. I really appreciate your support in that. And Sargis has been there from the very beginning, just like Tom McCullough, which we'll be seeing tomorrow. But Sargis, just so people understand, what you're going to be in Washington, not in Springfield. We're having a lot of different people coming on talking about the offices that they're going to. So tell us what that's going to entail. You're going to be in Washington.
Well, yeah, so I'm going to be in Washington. There's 535 seats in the Congress, U.S. Congress. 100 of them are in the Senate. The other 435 are in the House of Representatives. And I will be representing my constituents from the 9th Congressional District of Illinois and the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives. So that allows me an opportunity to really look at some of the needed funding that we have to work on to try to bring not just the economic development support that we need here, but also try to ensure that we're using our funding in the right ways and means. Defunding the police, as you have heard, is not the way to go. Right now, there's discussions. I found out yesterday that even the officers that serve in my kids' schools, and they all go to public schools, high schools, and grammar schools, that they're going to be removing those officers. I think that's a decision they have already made. This concept of going after the police has been in the works for years. And the only reason we've been able to hear about it recently is because of what happened with the uh, death or the murder of George Floyd, depending on how the courts rule, and what led through this process of the two parties fighting each other on the streets of our nation for a political power struggle. So that's all it is. At the end of the day, Ashley, you call it whatever you want. It's a lot of money that was created to build a base for a particular political organization. And when we had a change in 2016, those machines and political apparatuses took a hit. They got exposed, and unfortunately, this is the way they fight back. And the way to fight back is really go through the against institutions that really have to enforce law and order. People asked me recently, how do you get rid of corruption in Chicago? I said, it's very easy. Enforce the laws. If you enforce the laws, there's a lot of people in Chicago politics that will go to jail. But if you have individuals that you have put in key positions that are beholden to you who are not going to enforce those laws, then guess what? You're always going to have corruption. So I think this is what it is at the end of the day. It's really not about social justice or anything. It's about what can you do to keep our position of power, and how do we use the systems that we have. When you have individuals who are gonna, um, for the better term, and this is a better term, throw a tantrum like a child would, they will try to use whatever they can to get their way. And unfortunately, this is one of the ways that they're trying to exercise what they believe is their right to remain in positions of power. And hopefully, the best thing we could do as Americans is just walk in and vote individuals out that have not done anything for us across the board. And that goes on both sides of the aisle. I'm a Republican, but we have a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that have been absolutely useless when it came to just trying to get anything done for the benefit of the nation across the board.
That is one of the things that I respect about your run, is that you have not taken the political stance to the point where it's going to necessarily hurt any of the citizens of Illinois. And we've had that discussion about many different platforms. And I want to take this opportunity to express that to other people, because I think it's really important. One of the things that we've discussed with that is healthcare. So we'll start there. You have expressed that even though you have an opinion on like the
AC.
ACA, that even though you may not necessarily agree with it, if it's what's best for your constituents, or if that's what you feel that they want, that is what you would fight for until something better were to be available to them that we could adjust to.
Well, look, I thought that the ACA was large government. I expressed that in all my interviews, whether it was the Sun Times, the Tribune, Daily Herald, and I did tell them I think it was large government. It was way out of the norm. If you apply, I've been 20-year veteran in the military. We applied the problem solving technique to issues. When we actually apply the problem solving technique to the ACA, it was probably one of the worst possible means and ways of getting to a decision. Even though it's DC, you figure they couldn't be that inept, but they are. You put a bunch of lawyers together and people who have worked in the healthcare sector, you figure they could figure out something, but they were pretty bad at getting to what should be the way of addressing the issue. From day one, if the issue was that you had people that were not covered, you could have easily created a public option without creating an ACA that would cover those individuals. Look, even before the ACA, if you walked into an emergency room, regardless if you were a citizen or an undocumented immigrant, and you had an emergency, they took care of you, and you were set. The billing issue was something that the ones who had employment were taken care of through their employees or employers. And when you created the ACA, you basically alleviated the pressures off of the companies, and they didn't have to use it as a way of employing people. Now, with that said, what the ACA does for the lower rung of people, it covers them, and for the higher end people, they could care less. They just throw money at it anyway. They got money, they could care less. These are the same people who don't care who's the president. And they got plenty of money, whether it be a Republican or a Democrat, they'll just go through. They may lose a little bit of money here and there based on how they right there, what the taxes is. If a Democrat comes in and raises the taxes, guess what? They're just going to go ahead and pass on that cost to the regular citizen anyway. They could care less. So if a Republican comes in and alleviates that, then they'll use it to invest in other businesses. However, it's the middle class that gets squeezed in this case. And even though the middle class is getting squeezed, especially in my district, because now you have businesses, whether it be in Evanston and Lincolnwood, Skokie, they're all hurting because what is happening with the COVID restrictions. We were initially at 50 people that could be in restaurants were open. Now they just passed a new ordinance again from the governor saying that you can't even have people sitting in your restaurants anymore. You have to have them only outside, and then the outside restaurants have to be, the outside location, which is in this winter time, has to be closed at a certain hour. The number of people being inside from 50 just dropped to 25. So these businesses are hurting. There's no money that is circulating between the businesses and the folks that actually invest in those businesses by basically, going in and paying for services, whatever the business is, and still the constituents, because of what's happening, because there's so many uncertainties with COVID, still want me to defend the ACA, and I will defend the ACA because I'm not going to DC to represent myself. If I was going to go to DC to represent myself, I would not be running in one of the toughest districts that there is in Illinois. I would not be running in the 9th congressional district. But I came here to run and where I live, where my family lives, where they go to public schools, in order to be able to make the change. If my constituents say this is what we want, God bless them. I will work hard to ensure that it stays and we can get rid of the parts that don't work and keep the parts that we can work with them. If my constituents get up in 2 years and say, look, you know what, we don't like the ACA, there's something better out there, we want you to go defend it, then I will certainly look at what we can do systematically to support those constituents. So it's very simple. I think if our elected leaders understand that you're going there not for you, for the constituents, it's not an issue. So it doesn't become a political problem for me when it comes to my party. If my party says, Sangari, everybody in our party is against the ACA, you need to be against it. I'm going to say, no, go pound sand. I'm working for our constituents, not for you.
I think a lot of the big problem that people have is that they feel as though if the ACA gets taken away, it's going to negate the opportunity for people with pre-existing conditions. So I think that if we were going to find a better option, would you be agreeable to saying right now that you would fight for a better option that also included pre-existing conditions?
No, I mean, pre-existing conditions are everybody's going to suffer from. Everybody in America eventually might catch COVID. That's a reality. It's a virus that is going around. Everybody's catching it, and the virus does create pre-existing conditions in you. It creates issues with your lungs. It creates what some people call the fog, where it's even hard for someone to be able to function. I mean, some people have caught it. They said they couldn't even. They had a hard time even reading. And they didn't know how to read afterwards. It was almost causing some dementia factors in them. Nobody knows what this virus is, and it does kill. So although people survive it, you don't know what the effects are going to be. So I think eventually this type of a virus, if it spreads, is going to cause a lot of pre-existing condition in a lot of people across the board. So I think Republicans and Democrats have all said that we want to take care of pre-existing conditions. Now, as a matter, how do you keep the costs down while you're taking care of that? And I think the people who have private insurance, they like people that have the money, they could take care of that through their private insurance. Says the people who don't, then you can have a public option for them. Look, I've been working off of a public healthcare for 20 years in the military. I had a skin tag that was growing on my eyelid. And it was annoying because it was starting to grow back into the eye socket almost. It took me 6 months just to be able to get them to remove a skin tag. Even though you could tie it off with a string, try your best to get rid of it. You don't want your eye to be infected, but the fact that it takes 6 months to get a skin tag removed was absolutely ridiculous. Imagine now If you have to deal with issues of cancer, imagine now if you have to deal with other healthcare issues that are much more significant that you cannot delay a day or two here and there. I've known friends that been in the VA before the current POTUS came in, who had to wait weeks for just medication for their cancer treatments. And the system that we have, the numbers we have, 331 million Americans, is just not set up in a way where you could have it to where it could support a mass group of individuals in a public system. If you have individuals who could pay out of their pocket and are able to take care of themselves in private insurance, let them continue to do so. If you have companies who want to invest in negotiating individuals, high-paying jobs to fight for that talent to come in, let them do so. That we're doing in the past. The individuals that we were trying to cover were the individuals who just did not have the ability to maybe pay for themselves. However, with that said, we cannot just open it up to everybody. We cannot have individuals flying from outside of the countries here, and as soon as they land at our airport, they get in a cab and say, "Take me to a hospital," because I have a medical issue, and we have passed a bill that says anybody who is in the country has to be covered by this. It will collapse the system. So if you want to build a system, then you have to build it to where it can structurally function through the system of systems approach, where it doesn't collapse on itself. It doesn't help anybody, if you create something that completely is useless across the board for everyone. So there's ways of trying to work it. Just like when the POTUS came in, we had VA, and then we had VA option that you could go outside of the current system to be able to get support. I've declined multiple times medical support for me and even my spouse because I don't have time to get up once every week, drive down to a certain location 45 minutes away, just to be able to get, physical therapy done. When I walk outside my house, there's a physical therapy location, looking at me right across my home. I mean, this is what happens when you deal with government healthcare, and I don't want to beat the dead horse, but I think that you kind of get the gist. I think that system approach we could take what both sides are talking about, where they agree on, and build off of that for all of America.
I agree, and there's plenty of people in the comments who are agreeing right now too, with everything that you just said. So, how do you feel about the? You kind of talked about COVID and it's re-shutting down. How do you feel about mask mandates?
Listen, I traveled through Asia because we trained. I'm also director for Ravens Challenge International when we were training the various different SWAT and EOD teams from across the nations and various different countries and Thailand. I was used to traveling throughout Asia and seeing people using masks. It wasn't something unique to me, and I was used to seeing individuals always wearing on the airplanes. But those individuals wore it as adults. If they thought they were sick, they put a mask on. That was it. But this was for flus. We're not talking about a COVID, which and people want to read my article that I wrote in Japan Forward. So if they go to Japan Forward and put my last name, Sangari, Sangari, they'll see the article. And this was a systematic process by where China was trying to develop this type of a virus. Although it is in nature, they're trying to develop it to weaponize it for their use, so they could use it in the long run for their operational needs. Now, this thing we found out is not as deadly, but it's become more contagious since we started wearing masks. Because people who put masks on, first of all, half of our masks, if not majority of them, are coming from China. And these masks are not going to stop COVID. They're not going to stop those droplets. I see folks still today walking around with Chinese made masks, and they're useless. The mask I actually have, I think I've showed it to you in the past, is a mask that came out of Israel. It is designed for that particular purpose because Israel is constantly under attack. Everybody and their mother is trying, however possible, to attack that nation and the masks that are now being used by their IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, the type of mask that I brought in here, and I'm trying to bring shipments in for our police. Now I know Tom, you're going to talk to tomorrow, and me going back, got those covers for those N95 masks that even the police were using that were still not effective. From everything we've seen now, with studies that are coming out that are not being addressed, unfortunately, by a lot of the healthcare experts out there, is that the virus has found a way to become more contagious, moving around the current masks that are out there on the market. So, uh, and
Which is not
majority
the
of the,
typical format of a virus, by the way, just so people
yeah,
understand. Viruses are actually supposed to get less deadly and less potent as they go, because the whole point is to spread, not to kill the host before it can get to as many people as possible. So this is not the typical, and that's why part of the reason why masks are not working. We have Donna Smith Murray here. She says, I wear a mask 8 hours a day. I work in healthcare, and she still got COVID. So there are plenty of people who are agreeing with what you're saying, that the masks that we currently use are basically useless. It's more
yeah,
for the idea of
yeah,
making people
yeah.
feel better.
That's all it is. I had a soldier of mine one time, young man. He said, "Sir, I know you guys talk to us about the warrior spirit, about getting out there into the fight, being aggressive. Um, if I went through that door, as you were saying, and we were teaching him how to clear rooms, uh, is that warrior spirit really going to protect me?" I said, "No, you're probably going to get killed if you go through that room and 50 caliber machine gun opens up on you. Probably going to kill you and the people behind you." He goes, "Then why do you teach me to go through that door that I'll be invisible?" I said, "Because if I didn't teach you that, then you would be hesitant to go through the door. My job is to get you to that door. And the more aggressive you are, the faster you are, possibly, hopefully, that you'll miss it. But the reality is, especially from a guy who was in combat, it's funny, when a bullet grabs on that floorboard and starts pinging around from one side of the that hallway to another. I don't care who you are, what training you have, it will find you if it needs to. But it's just a process of we kind of mentally prepare ourselves for the battles ahead. Yeah, the mask gives you protection to an extent. Like I said, I've seen it overseas, but this virus is a different virus. It's not the regular flu. Again, our culture is different too. A friend of mine, came to see me, and he said, "How is it possible that because I'd written an article on the WHO and how in Hong Kong we've had a low number of deaths, Taiwan itself too, specifically, and I putting both of them out because I want to make sure there are viewers Google search those two different names, Taiwan and Hong Kong, and they'll see some of the matches are coming up on Google search." Uh, I said, because our culture is different. I said, if you're in Asia and I'm in a Japanese culture, I'm in there. The person comes in, they take off their shoes, they walk in, they wash their hands before they come to sit at the table to talk to you, and they don't talk loud. They talk very soft spoken. I said, I love you, buddy, but you had the dog, take a poop outside. You picked it up with your Kleenex. You walked through the same grass that he was. You came into the house. You didn't take off your shoes. You sat here. You're very loud, and you put your hand in, a plate with the chips, and you eat. Sometimes you wipe your nose, and you go back into the same thing. I said, the culturally we're two different people. So when it comes to spreading of this type of a virus, in certain cultures it spreads less than another culture because there's certain things they do in those cultures that are different than our cultures. That doesn't mean we have to change the way we approach and who we are. It's just that we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're not like other nations somewhat. Culturally, they have lived more close proximity to each other, so they've taken certain steps where we may not have in the past. Have we made those changes? Yeah. Now people are putting masks, they're social distancing to an extent. But I gotta tell you, if I'm standing outside and there's a 3 knot wind behind me, it doesn't matter if you're 14 feet away. A droplet's gonna come find you. And especially even if you have those masks, are useless. So all we could do is react to what is happening. And I think in the long run, eventually, we'll probably develop some herd immunity to this type of the virus. And then we hope that this virus does not globally change, because remember, it's not just in the US here, it's all across the planet. Everybody's catching it, so it's evolving as different nations are attacking it from different approaches.
I want to ask you about your opinion about how Governor Pritzker and Lori Lightfoot are handling the situation. But before I do, Joanne Main has a question. Will the cold weather help to calm down the virus, in your opinion?
There's a study that is saying majority of the spreads have taken place internal to families, because when family groups are getting together, somebody's catching it, as an example, coming home, not knowing that they have it, that family is spreading it to other loved ones. So science is all over the map on this, really all over the map, to be honest. So I cannot say yes or no either way. I mean, do the basics you can. I caught a very bad cold because we were out putting out signs till 2:30 in the morning in the rain. Me and my campaign manager caught it. It wasn't COVID. We caught it, and we got over it. And it is what it is. You can't tell, to be honest. It is going around. It is everywhere. It is in the big cities. It is in the rural areas. It is all over the globe. And
And how do
we
you
just
feel
have to
about
react to
how Pritzker and Lightfoot have uh,
it.
approached the
Yeah,
virus?
their approach has to be tied to science, and unfortunately I don't think sometimes it is tied to science. I think they, like I said, they do things to say that I've done something, just to say I've done something. I mean, take a look at what the governor in California said. Okay, take off your mask, put food in your mouth, put the mask on, and chew. You know, I don't. That's You're not an emperor of China, okay? Uh, so we're Americans. There's certain things we can do, certain things we cannot. I don't think destroying everything that was institutionalized in our Constitution is a way to try to defeat this thing. We have to see what the patterns are across the board, and depending on what the patterns are, try to approach it as best as we can. Okay. You had individuals in issues saying, you know what, uh, uh, don't wear a mask. Then the same people came out and said wear a mask. Then the same people came out and said there's studies that says masks are not effective. Then the same people are going to come out tomorrow and say, well, it used therapeutics. President issue said I'm a big therapeutics guy. What happened? The other party suddenly got up and said, oh no, therapeutics are awful. Okay. And then he said, then we're going to go with science. Then I'm going to get, and science has developed a vaccine. Well, no, if you develop a vaccine, that's not we cannot trust it. If you're going to politicize everything, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think part of the reason that these politicians have constantly failed across the board is because they're trying to control a virus. You're not going to completely control it or defeat it. It's all around the planet. You have to find out what are the patterns, and it takes sometimes years, maybe decades. We have not been able to destroy the common flu for decades. Okay. And this virus somewhat is showing that it reacts the same way. Is it deadly if you have pre-existing conditions? Yes, it is. My mother-in-law caught it in a nursing home. Everybody in the nursing home caught it. Why? Because that was a decision the governor made and the mayor made at that time. She caught it in a Chicago nursing home. She had at least 5 to 7 pre-existing conditions, and she survived. You have individuals who caught it who didn't even know they had pre-existing condition, and they pass away from it. I had friends who went in and got tested. They were positive for COVID. They went back again to retest. They came up positive, and both times they were tested were put into the increase of numbers of being tested for COVID. I had an individual friend of my spouse who went in and had an issue with kidney stones. Got a letter that you have COVID, and went back, tested, and realized it was a false test, but it was put in the numbers. My kid's dentist, going on a vacation, had taken a test. She had taken all the precautions, and she was came up as a positive. So all the kids were worried that there was a positive test. We didn't know what to do with them. We had to isolate them. Guess what? They did another test on her and realized it was a false positive. But all these false positives are still in the system. The system doesn't purge them. Guy in this case, lady goes in for a kidney stone issue, and then they have her as a COVID, which she's not a COVID case. So uh, I don't know if we are going to have all the right information when it comes to what the politician uses as data to try to make decisions. I think it's an issue of we all need to take individual measures to make sure that we protect ourselves, protect our loved ones, and hope that currently the mask and the therapeutics and washing your hands and just taking some basic precautions is going to get us to where we need to be. No guarantee. Absolutely no guarantee.
I agree. I also think that on top of manipulating the COVID numbers, we've seen a lot of manipulation across the country, not just here. But since we're speaking of Illinois, when it comes to the racial diversity that we've seen, splitting the city, splitting the state, and splitting the country apart, and I feel as though that's been kind of manipulated too. So we've heard Lori Lightfoot has come out and said that if the federal government does not even out the city's $1.2 billion deficit, that she will basically defund the police and fire 615 officers. And Pritzker has come out with this whole fair tax that he's trying to push. So between the two of them, it's going to be just crippling to the middle class. So if you have the opportunity, would you stand against the kind of legislation that they're trying to promote to basically pay off the mistakes that they've made in Chicago?
Well, look, the only way you could do it is you got to walk in and vote, right? Right now, I have a recommended walk in vote no on the so-called fair tax. Look, remember the word tax is in there. If the word tax is in there, you're getting taxed. Okay. Um, I again, if you say, you see, it's easier for a politician to say, I'm going to tax the rich, because if the politician has to say, well, there has to be a tax against everybody, then the politician is not going to be able to pass a tax because they have to justify to everybody, why am I being taxed? If you go in and you hit a yes on the so-called progressive tax, and the politician comes in and says, I'm going to tax the business. First of all, the business is going to leave. Business ain't going to stay. Every time in our history, when there's been a tax increase, guess what? People have picked up and left. Okay, so if that base is gone, how are you generating funding and money? You're going to have to fall through the next bracket, right? If you go in and say yes on this tax because you say, well, they're going to go after the rich. Okay, increase the riches, take taxes out of their real estate. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to increase your rent. The rich people are not going to lose money if you raise taxes on them. The current POTUS came in and gave a cut. That cut manifested itself in my check when I got money. Everybody saw that. I could physically see it manifesting itself. When you have these type of taxes, it doesn't manifest any which way in you. It doesn't. Because if you say, I'm going to lower the taxes on person who's just working these many hours, or some ain't working at all, and I'm going to take from this guy who's busting his behind to give to you, that person who has a business, has a retail shop, is going to pass it on to you anyway. They're not going to just say, yeah, okay, I'll just work harder and I'll pay more. It doesn't work that way. They'll pass it on to you. You may not see it, you may not feel it, but you can be like, hey, how come the milk is a little bit higher? How come I have to pay a little bit more for my utilities? How come I have to pay a little bit more for my gasoline? How come I have to pay a little bit more for my city sticker? That's how they're passing it on to you. You're still getting hit. Okay.
Nickel
The
and
only
dime.
thing they're doing is a shell game. They're just shuffling money in a different direction. But guess who still makes money? The politician. The politician and the people that are tied to that politician. They're not getting broke. They're not going to be hurt. You're going to be hurt. And majority of those politicians who say we're going to go after, businesses and rich folks living in Chicago. Guess what? Majority of their property that they have that is here is almost like a summer vacation location. They actually have residences other places. They don't even reside here. Go look at half of your ex-politicians and find out where they reside. All of them have left Chicago. I use this example when I was debating with my incumbent, Jan Schkowsky, and I said, it's funny because we were on a, oh my God, we were on a debate with the
Ishmaeli.
yeah, and not just Ishmaeli, but also the Jewish community too. And I said in the Jewish community, there's 15 steps from the temple wall to the temple, where the temple wall represents the human world, and then you walk from there into the temple, where this spiritual world. I said, if you take those 15 steps, you walk into what is called Indiana. Same tax requirements. Physically, only on a map you see this imaginary line. When you stand out there, unless you see something that says "Welcome to Indiana," you wouldn't even know you're in Indiana. You take 15 steps in one direction and you're in a surplus. Everybody has lower taxes. Nobody, they have to pay less real estate taxes, less taxes for the utilities. You take the same 15-inch step back here, and you got, uh, uh, DPAs, which are deferred prosecution agreements of politicians who are named in federal indictments that are affecting the utilities, like Common Ed went through, AT&T might be going through, and all these other. And these are AT&T is in Indiana as it is here. Over here, it's under prosecution. In Indiana, 15 steps on the other side of the border, it's not. Why? Because they're using the same kind of a tax regulation that we have in here in Chicago, but they're not tied to corruption. They clean up their stuff. The rule
That's
of
a good
law
point because
exists.
isn't Pritzker right now, doesn't he actually have a deferment for the prosecution he's supposed to be facing for ripping the toilets out?
Well,
Isn't
they all sign a DPA, and I have said this, and when I go in Congress, I'm gonna make sure that I don't, the federal prosecutors like to sign DPAs because that way they can turn around and say, you know what, I've had a 95% conviction rate or 100% conviction rate because the DPA allows that, so they can say on their record, I've done this, and they're building their record to get the next job. So my
Mm.
recommendation is get rid of the DPAs. Do not do deferred prosecution agreements. Go in and hit them hard. Take your 8 years that it takes sometimes, develop your case, but go in and take them. If you lose a case, so be it. But open up all the records. I mean, literally open them all up. There's a process called discovery. Bring everything in. The ties to the politicians, the money, the Chi-Com dollars that have been pouring in here, how Congress has been moving money through here, how the leadership and the Illinois House has been tied to corruption. Get everything opened up. You lose it, but at least it's opened up. Allow for other prosecutions to take place. But you have to be willing as a prosecutor to take the chance that you may lose a case, but not negotiate with them. Because what happens if I sign a DPA like the ComEd, I charge them millions of dollars, which they could cover in a month of utilities being charged to the American citizen who's living in Illinois. Uh, it doesn't really solve anything. It might sound like a big number. In this case, individuals like the current Illinois House Speaker can either write a DPA and ride off into sunset, victorious, and retire, and still continue collecting pensions. Same thing with the governors. You have to be able to be willing to go after individuals and be willing to lose a case as a federal prosecutor, but start enforcing the law. Once people go to prison for a long time, they'll realize that the system doesn't work the way they had it set up, and the shell game dissolves. All it is a shell game, Ashley. It is about how you move money. I know that Skokie has made a decision on November 2nd. They're going to pass a ordinance to say that if you steal more than $300, you just simply get a ticket. Now, the people in Skokie who are supposedly there for the interests of the Skokie citizens, which I am a person of residence, they're gonna say, well, this is because of fairness and justice and social equity. Bunch of baloney. Let me tell you what it is. It is how to move money into their own pockets, because you do a ticket for $300. The guy who's coming in now on November 3rd, stealing the tires off of my car that is sitting outside of my driveway, isn't going to be able to pay it. They'll waive that, but they'll go take money and move money underneath that ticket. As long as they get a piece of paper that is tied to a dollar, now they can launder money into their pockets. That's all it is. These people simply do it for themselves. There's a reason why there's a mayor in my constituency right now that is thinking about maybe in a couple of years stepping down from their position as a mayor and running as a trustee. Why? Because that's how we move money. That's how they
So
launder money.
So before I ask you the next question, I just want to clarify to everybody. This means that if someone comes onto your property, which in and of itself, you're stepping onto someone's private property, but if they come and they steal, as long as it's not over a certain amount of damage, they won't even be arrested. They won't be charged for the burglary. They won't be charged for any of that. They just simply get a fine.
Yeah, they
So
won't
I
get a
want
record.
people,
Yeah, they will not get a
yeah.
record on their
So
file. So
to
it'd be
anybody who
nothing but
lives
no
in
fine.
Sargis's district, please understand what that entails and go and use your voice about that, because that's some serious stuff. And I don't want it to pass in your district and then it end up coming to mine, because I'll throw a fit. So please, everybody stand against that. I also want to point out something very important that Sargis just pointed out. The police catch a lot of flack for the arrests that they have to make. But please, to everybody out there who has a problem with police, remember, they only arrest you when you break a law that a legislator creates, that a judge is willing to prosecute, and that a state's attorney wants to get more convictions on the record for. So the police are not where you need to be going if you want to change how the judicial system is run and all of the people sitting in prison. The police are only the ones who hold the cuffs. They're not the ones that do all the after effect work or really benefit from it. So if you want to change that, go after the judges, go after the state's attorneys, go after the legislators that are creating the laws that you don't like, that are putting people in prison. That's where you're going to be making the real effects. Now, on that note, I also want to ask Sargis, we've talked about the legislation, we've talked about the legal aspect, and we've talked about the taxes. So you as a legislator, to fix all of these things, would you be willing to freeze the pay of Congress until the budget is balanced? So,
Yeah,
because as a
it's
constituent, that drives
there's
me insane.
they are not gonna freeze their. Listen to me. They're gonna increase them. They're gonna pay themselves a salary increase. They're not gonna freeze anything. You have to vote them out. That's it. That's the only option you have.
Right,
That's
that's
the
what I'm saying.
only
So
option you have.
if we get the use in of the world, would you be willing to freeze, would you vote yes to freeze those amounts until we get a balanced budget? Because I, as a constituent, that pays taxes, if I'm not getting a pay raise, but I see that my congressman is, but they want to take more of my money in taxes, that's going to piss me off. So quite frankly, so you pay taxes too. If think of it in that respect, would you be willing to say we're not going to keep taking raises until we can make it to where everybody is, being more fiscally conservative and the whole of the state is benefiting?
Look, I'm willing to do everything. I'm even willing to say that if you go to Congress, you should. Well, we'll leave that out because look, people have ran on term limits. We've sent individuals to Congress with great ideas. Okay, we have also sent capable people. I mean, we've sent astronauts, lawyers, physicists, doctors, laymen, priests, and they all have come out useless across the board. It's called the power of the incumbency. Um, Let me kind of explain to you what happens in Congress, and maybe the viewers don't understand how Congress works, but I'll give you a little bit of a look into it. So November 3rd, I'm going to win my district. I'm going to be the new congressman for the 9th Congressional District of Illinois. I'm going to beat an incumbent who's been here and the same party for 75 years. Okay. On that evening, the representatives of the other party in Springfield are going to first chew out everybody in the machine that did not ensure that I was knocked out. Then they're going to get up and they're going to take their pen and they're going to redraw my district. If there's a district, because technically we lose 2 districts because of the census. I may literally not have a district in 2 years. So they're going to redraw it because they have to, because now I beat one of their power brokers. So they won't knock me out, but they'll take it and draw it in a way to make sure I become a 1-term representative. I have to still pay out of pocket to collect money to go to DC to try to get sworn in. As soon as I win, all the people who could care less who Colonel Sangari was, never invested $1 in Colonel Sangari, never supported him, suddenly are going to show up. And all these great Republicans who were not helping my congressional run are going to start writing checks. Of course, you take the checks because, you know, they're from your party in support of winning in Congress. While that process is going on, the other party has already selected, after they're redrawing the map, of who is going to be the next person who's going to replace me. And they're going to choose 2 individuals. They're going to choose an individual that's going to run as what we call a rhino, Republican in name only. And then they're going to choose who's going to be their sweetheart, who's going to be the person who's going to be the next place call holder for that party, the opposite party, and the 2022 election. So they're going to hold probably a breakfast sometime around January 10th and start collecting money for these 2 candidates. Now, I would not have even raised my hand to swear in yet, and they would be doing this. Now, by the time I go in, sit in Congress, turn on my computer, finally I'm ready to go. And by the way, if the presidential election is close and is in the courts, guess what? I may not be sitting behind a computer until sometime around late February. If they decide to shut down the government, maybe even early March. I mean, it's a long shot, but that's a reality. The person who's already going to run against me, who I have no clue who this person is, that the machine has chosen, is going to file their first quarter filing with the Federal Election Commission in March, or in April, I should say. Now, when I show up to DC, just like the Democrats do and the Republicans, the Republican Party leadership is going to say, welcome, Colonel Sangari. Congratulations on your victory. Here's the assignments to the committees you're going to be sitting on. And by the way, here is the bills we're going to be working on in the 117th Congress. Now, they're going to do the same thing on the Democratic side. Now, if Congress is controlled, the House, by the Republicans, I can pass a bill. If the Democrats control it, because the Democratic Party doesn't like the fact that I won in the night, they're going to ensure that I don't even pass one bill, even though it's good for my constituents. Because their plan is to replace me in 2022. They could care less about the constituents in the 9th Congressional District. That's why they always carve them out. Give some to the 10th if need be, give some to the 9th, or rechange it, call it some other district. If I don't agree with my own party is going to say, okay, that's fine. Go sit in some committee that doesn't do anything. Cannot change the requirements of helping your district. I have to find a political means to not just win within my own party, but I have to be able to win with the other side if I'm going to pass anything. Now, what happens, functional budgets are agreed upon. There's 150 budgets for foreign policy requirements around April, same time that it's been a month I've been in. And those are already allocated for or requested by the Secretary of State as to what they want. So foreign policy wise, you're limited unless you put in a supplemental to support it. Domestic policy, I have to go with what is on the books, whether the Republicans have wanted or the Democrats, what they want to push on. I have recommended in my talks that it doesn't matter if President Trump or President Biden wins, it needs to be focused internally, and reconstruction is or construction projects is priority mandatory, I think. So that way, whatever bill I have has to be attached to that type of a larger, you know, larger bill that moves through. Now, what may be authorized means your bill was able to get through a committee, it was approved, the Senate came out with their own version, and the president is going to sign it. What might be authorized may not be allocated in the second half of the calendar. That means no dollars to it. So while I'm going through this, trying to get one bill through Congress, guess what's happening? The guy that they've chosen to run and to knock me out, or the gal, is going to be filing their second quarter or filing with the FEC come 6 months in the new year. Now, we don't even know where COVID is going to be at this time. By the time you get to August recess, if you haven't passed a bill, guess what? You're not passing anything. You have no significant legislation. And what the party leaderships do, both Republican and Democrat, put all these bills out, and this is what happens, where most people in Congress end up voting along their party line because they're stuck. They can't get anything through. The party has put pressure on them. They have to go along party line. This is why I say to the folks that are so-called moderate Democrats don't exist. The reason they don't exist because the party has been taken by these far left socialists. And even a moderate Democrat has no choice in this system to have to just go ahead and line up and press button if it says D, press no if it says R. And same thing vice versa, it happens with the Republicans when it comes to Democrats. Now,
So
guess what? September 3rd of next year, if I'm going to run in 2022, I have to have already filed my paperwork and I have to start collecting signatures to get on the ballot in November to run against a rhino that they're going to run against me, saying that he's a Republican, wants to run against me in March to try to knock me off the ballot because it's the open primary. So I don't have to face their incumbent or whoever they think there's going to be their future incumbent in November of 2022. Look, it's at least I know how the process works. I guarantee you, there's probably 435 people out there, or 335. Let's take a number off 100 who don't even have a clue how it works, that are trying to come in and try to run it for this system. You have to negotiate through this process. You have to negotiate through all these obstacles that are in front of you. That's why what happens with special interests when you don't have term limits, they know how the system works. They know exactly that you, in the end of the day, need money to be able to run. And they know that it's very easy to knock you off because most voters are single issue voters, whether it be guns, whether it be abortion, whether it be healthcare, whether it be whatever. They're single voter issues. But if you explain to that single vote issue guy and gal that, listen to me, it's all a shell game. This is how the process works. So that issue that they've sold to you, that you constantly fall on the sword for, and always go and vote along your party line, is a joke, is a charade, is a way to keep your finger from moving from here to vote out an incumbent. Eventually, you'll wake up and you'll start changing the system. We have to have men and women who are willing to say, the heck with me staying in power. I'm going to do what's right. And if I lose, so be it. I lose. And frankly, if it was about Colonel Sangari wanting to be in Congress, guess what? I could have ran in any other district. I could have gone down south and ran in Illinois. I easily won because of the Trump effect. I'm a Republican running against one of the toughest, most entrenched people in Congress who is not even trusted by her own party. She's hated by her own party. She's a senior, but they don't even put her as a senior in her committees because she's incompetent. And her husband moved a lot of money to create the organization, like, be part of the creation of the organizations like Acorn and others that were set up to not only permanently ensure for the next 100 years that the ninth remains under one Democratic Party control, but to be able to ensure that the organizations were created that were destabilizing Trump rallies in 2016 that are now today The same people are floating into these organizations that are causing all the issues domestically in our country. So why did I run? Because that's where I live. That's where I plant my flag. That's where my ethnic community is. And you need to have individuals like me get into the fight. And I've told my friends and family and friends, especially that are military, run, guys, especially if you serve in the military. We got to get in here. Otherwise, we are going to lose our country because this is how the system is set up. This is how the shell game is set up. And if you don't get in here and fight, then everything we did overseas is a waste because we have completely lost home side. This is how these incumbents stay in power.
So in that respect, there's some key points that I've asked every one who's running for office that has been on the show, and we've gone over a couple of them. And one of those is term limits, because we want term limits. The other is the pay freeze. We don't want politicians getting paid more if it's just because they're taking more of our money. And the other big one is legislation passing. There's a huge push to have legislation bills be under the format of they must be 100 pages or less, so that we stop getting these thousands and thousands of page bills that say, you know, save the puppies, but it really has nothing to do with saving the puppies. Underneath, it's all let's kill cats. So those are things that we really want to see happen. And based on kind of the explanation that you're giving us, is that this is not going to happen without almost a decade-long process of cleaning up the system before we can really see any of these things come to pass. So it's possible, but this is something that basically what you're saying is that we as the citizens can't fall asleep on this. We have to continue to make sure that we're voting, and that we're voting for people who are going to stand by their word. And like you said, even under the possibility of not being reelected, we must do these things that need to be done. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, I look. I can go in and put in, term limits through a process. It probably will never make it out of a committee. It will never be signed by the House. If it is signed by the House, it will never be agreed upon in the Senate. If it's signed in the Senate, the president would have to approve it, and the president would possibly, because remember, both President Trump and even President Obama agreed that term limits should be part of the process. But special interest won't allow it. Special interest has a pretty cozy gig, because
Speaking of special
yeah.
interests, how is it? Because this is something I've never had somebody explain to me how this even passed. But how did it become that a corporation or lobbyist groups could be considered? Because it used to be that when you were running for office, you couldn't get money from corporations or special interests. They had to come from we the people. And the reason for that was then you were beholden to your constituents. You know, my $5 meant something. But somehow they passed legislation that made it to where that was indeed not the case anymore. That a corporation could hand millions of dollars over to a politician to help them run for office. So my $5 meant nothing. So is there any way that we can reverse that? Or is there anything that we can do as the constituents to make our voices relevant again, really?
Um, you see, there was a cap put in on how many representatives we could have in the House of Representatives. Technically, that cap could be removed. That's one way of, because you'll never be able to. They're not gonna approve term limits. They're just not gonna do it. They're not gonna shoot themselves in the face. They're not gonna do that. Even some of the most libertarian candidates who Rand Paul, his dad, who went in and tried to push for term limits, never was able to push it through. Now, if you remove the cap on how many representatives, guess what happens? You could do that easily. That means more representatives for a lesser number of people. Look, I'm running against an incumbent who has millions of dollars in her coffers over a 20-year period, has done absolutely nothing. I have to reach out and touch 750,000 constituents in my district to know that I exist. I guarantee there's people who have no clue that I'm even running for office, let alone who the heck I am when they walk in the voting poll. I just don't have the money to be able to reach them all. If I say I'm not going to take special interest money, I'm going to do it on my own. It can be very limited in how I could reach them. Even with what I decided to do when we were under COVID strikes, I created my new program, New Paradigms, and tried to go through social media. Social media was putting kibosh on me because social media doesn't care about Colonel Sangari being in Congress. They care about the person that is beholden to them being in Congress. Because they're a company. At the end of the day, they care about their dollars. They could care less about you. Actually, I hate to tell you. So the, the if you remove that cap, now no longer are representatives known by 750,000. You could split the districts into smaller groups, and that representative now has to really represent everyone within that district, not just a small echo chamber. The 9th congressional district loses because Jan Schkowsky only cares about one place, and that is along the lake side. These individuals who are going to walk in and just hit Democrat regardless, could care less. Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. She's got him in her hands. They're not going in and voting. Let's give Colonel Sangari a shot, okay? And it doesn't matter how the rest of the 9 votes. If she has that, and those moderate Democrats or independents don't come over and vote for me, guess what? It doesn't matter. You could put, um, and I don't want to offend everybody, but you could put Jesus Christ in my position. He's gonna lose, okay? Because that those individuals are trained to do this for 22 years, and they're not gonna say, you know what, maybe it's time to give somebody else a try. And it's not speaking negatively about them. It's just the power of the incumbency. That's how it works. Um, if you cut those districts up, now you'll no longer are going to be somebody's known by everyone. Everybody knows who Nancy Pelosi is. If you have more representatives, guess what? Not too many people will know who Nancy Pelosi is. Not too many people will know who the representative of the 50th district in Illinois is, because you have smaller districts and more representative of that representative, because everybody now have access to the representative. Right now, I just explained to you how the process works. I go into DC. I'm limited in how much time I have just to spend with people. 750,000 individuals is very difficult to listen to each one, try to address the individual issues. That's why the machines are created. That's why a lot of these representatives you have are just machine place call holders. You can call them whatever you want. And tonight they call her Jan Schkowsky. Tomorrow they could call her some other name. That's why the kingmakers sit in Springfield for the folk that are democratic that are running here. That's why the machine is so well versed as far as cranking the votes out. One good thing that Jan Schkowsky runs is her office, right? But her office was created by the machine. It wasn't created by her. If you call today Jan Schkowsky's office, you got, young men and women who are going to pick up the phone, be nice to you, courteous. Oh, what is the issue you have? You say I have an issue with, my Part B, as far as my healthcare is concerned. They'll say, okay, they'll look up your name right away. They're searching right there on the computer as they're talking to you. What is your voting record? They want to check that out. If your voting record is somebody that they're not going to flip, guess what? They'll give you a number and say, yeah, this person can help you. And then they'll send you off for somebody who can help you. If you're somewhere where they might see a possibility that you could be flipped, even though that person at the number at the IRS or the health department can help you, they won't give you that information. They'll say, you know what, we'll take care of your issue. And then if they talk to you and suddenly in your talk, as they're asking you how you feel, what's going on, you say, my son's business hurting. Oh, so son has a business. Oh, okay. So there's money that can come to our campaign. So you know what they'll do? They'll be like, guess what, Mary, or whatever your name is, Alice, why don't we take care of your issue ourselves? I'm sure the congresswoman will be very interested. She cares about these issues. And then what they do is they'll set it up to where now they know if they help you, possibly your son or your daughter who owns a business in the future can put money in their campaign. So they'll come and answer a question for you that you could have done yourself, but you didn't know that, or somebody else could have done for you, but they wanted to do it to be the face for it. In the past, they used to come to your house, give you some cookies. Oh, Mary, why don't you invite 5 of your friends here too? And your friends would show up. Everybody has a good time. They ate some cookies. They know because if you walked in and said, you know what, Congresswoman's office was so nice to us, I'm going to vote for her. They know if you vote more than twice for them, you're done. You have a hard time moving your finger to vote for a brand new guy like a Lieutenant Colonel Sangari who served this nation over
Mm,
so many years in combat. And I did it without asking you to do anything for me. It's a shell game. It
mm,
is, you have people who know how to sell used cars. And this is what happens. They create these echo chambers. The machine keeps them in power and will constantly keep on cranking it out. Because at the end of the day, American people are kind, they're good. And these individuals know how the American person, American citizen thinks, who they are at the core, and they will use what is possible for them to be able to get their agenda moving, which in most cases is they stay in power, they die in office, and they get replaced by their family members. When the impeachment process took place, Jan Schakowsky, who's in the 9th Congressional District, stood on stage during the third time a president of the United States was being impeached. And the words that came out of her mouth was, my legacy. And then she mentioned her son, Ian. So in the Middle East, where I came from, when somebody stayed in office until they died and were replaced by a family member, we call them dictators. Over here, we put the word honorable in front of their names and call them congressman, congresswoman. You want to change it, you got to get folks in to change this. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you, this network that is established to really do nothing more than make money for them is going to absolutely tear this country apart, and they don't care. They don't care. They could care less where the country ends up 50, 60 years. Period. Zero. If they did, we wouldn't be in the position we are today.
no, the idea of keeping the foundations of our and we're a constitutional republic is what we really are. People think we're a democracy. We're a democratic, or we're a constitutional republic. This is something that is very important to you as well, but for a different reason. You actually immigrated here legally and got your status, and you became part of our military and assimilated to being an American, of your choice and of your family's choice, which I find to be an amazing and wonderful thing. It's a great part of, of who we are as Americans, is having that sort of immigration. But you guys had to do it the right way, because you had to come across a pond, which is a little different than how some other people do it. So, what are your feelings on the legislation to allow illegal immigration, considering the way that you had to do it, which is the right way? What is your opinion as an immigrant on how we are looking at those policies now?
Well, look, there's laws on the books, right? I mean, even now, if you enforce the laws, you won't have illegal immigration into the country. But people are not enforcing the laws. I think the current POTUS is trying to at least secure the borders, but there's going to be a holistic process behind it, right? I've been asked on the DACA issue. I said, yeah, I support DACA. The president supports DACA, most do. But that, just saying that is different. There's a lot of things you have to go through the process of ensuring that the people who are here, who came here illegally, still have to go through a process of being able to secure their legal status. That's it. I think if you go through that process, at least you can see them as being, going through the process of making amends for what wasn't done before. Look, I remember as a lieutenant, we were doing an operation. And in the operation in the military, you always have to tie all your equipment to yourself in a training process. And we had a young lieutenant who was in the process with us through the pipeline, had not tied in his uh, night vision goggles the right way. And during the operations, he lost his goggles. A young private had picked him up, put him in his backpack, and we had to, of course, lock down everywhere. People's flights had to be canceled for a 3 day vacation until we found those knots. Now, of course, the young private who had taken those went through UCMJ and faced a severe fine on it. But I remember the commander who was lecturing us said, he's half of the problem. You are the other half. All you have to do is make sure your stuff was tied on correctly. Look, people say that the Democratic Party and the far left is driving this whole train on open borders. Let me tell you who drove the train on the open borders for first. It was businesses. Businesses who said, you know what, we're going to get cheap labor coming in here. They pressured, the Republican side, keep the borders open. We need cheap labor. Well, cheap labor came here, and then cheap labor said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and create unions. Now the same businesses said, well, wait a minute. That wasn't a reason we were trying to keep the borders open. Well, if you're going to create unions, guess what? We're going to work on both ends of the aisle, and we're going to go overseas to China to find much more cheaper labor. We do it to ourselves. We do it for what? For a benefit of a profit. Listen, we have to go back and we have to fix things that have been screwed for decades. If I want to make a change in a policy requirement, and it's a 5-year policy, not only do I have to reverse it for 5 years, which would take 10 years to really reverse it, a decade, then aim it in the new direction. The things we're trying to address are generational. You have incumbents that are part of the scheme to benefit themselves through business connections because businesses have money and they donate to candidates on both ends of the aisle. The people who are suffering are the individuals here. I had a relative of mine who sat in Hungary and bled out dollars, had no money. A family members tried to support them. And finally, when we finally got the visa clearance for him to come, the pressures of this nation were so enormous on him, what he had to deal with, because he lost all his money there. He came here illegally, went through the process, that he eventually ended up dying early in life. Okay, daughter and young man, son who were in their most in their lifetime where they need a dad the most, lost their father. You have individuals who can just cross through a border area, come here, and live in the system without ever having to go through the process of being legally recognized as people that are here. Um, it's a difficult thing to deal with, but as long as for me, you're a person who has come here, and in my case, I didn't even know what no or yes meant. Literally couldn't speak English. I didn't know what no yes meant, meaning that I didn't know what those words meant. You might as well have been saying jello in another language to me. I applied myself. I scored the highest score of the Constitution test when Constitution test used to be tough for all those high schoolers who are listening. We had to write out most of the articles. Um, I got the highest score in the Constitution test out of my entire school in Chappelle Grammar School. I went to high school. I played football. I was a Letterman winner. I went to college. I earned a 2-year ROTC scholarship. I served 20 years in the U.S. military, 6 years continuous combat operations. My first tour, I was blown up 7 times. I had to fight 2 medical boards just to stay and go back into the fight. Remember that I didn't even know how to write the letter R after my injury. I didn't know what a paperclip was. Looking at it, I learned to teach myself the language. Still go to war. Still to serve the nation, and I have an opportunity in 7 days to be a representative in the U.S. Congress. If you have that type of an individual here, regardless how they came here, that person is part of the fabric of the United States. But if you have somebody who comes here and flies the flag of another nation, doesn't speak a lick of English, doesn't work, and does nothing more than just raid our social security and everything else that we have to live on the books forever as a person who's not a contributor and has family members that don't contribute, then it's those individuals have to go through a process. And they have to start understanding that being an American is not just being here. Being an American meaning being American holistically, This is the only country that nobody ever told me when I came here that you cannot speak Assyrian, language Jesus Christ spoke, which is my traditional language. That you cannot practice your culture. They can't practice your religion. And so you could be all that and still be an American. And by the way, here's our best young men and women that we have. Take them to war and bring them back alive, and you have an opportunity to be a congressman in our Congress. I'm going to be one of the 435 members of Congress out of 331 million Americans. The fact that this country gives me that opportunity, it's in itself wonderful. I don't believe that we need to destroy it because you have individuals who don't understand this process, who don't understand the gift that they have been given. We destroy this, that's it. You're going to have one chance to vote socialism or capitalism, legal immigration, illegal immigration in this country. And that choice is given to you on 3 November. You choose other side, I don't know what the future is going to be. You choose
Oh,
this
Sargis.
side, at least we can try to do something.
I wish that, you know what, I'm so glad that this is someday I hope someone just takes the film clip that we just made, and I hope they use that in a university someday, because you made my heart smile so big just hearing everything that you just said. Um, and to compound on that, as I am a third generation Hispanic woman, and my family came here legally, and I've done my research, and we are now to the point where 67% of the Hispanic community is actually natural born to America. We were born here, raised here, created here. So we're proud of our Hispanic heritage, but we are in all fashions American. And that 37% that's out there, it's actually thankfully becoming a smaller and smaller portion that is coming here illegally, and not doing it the right way. And I thank our president for that, for putting those stopgaps in place. So I hope that the other party involved with this will stop turning the Hispanic culture into this victimhood idealism, to pull votes. I think that that's terrible. But thank you so much, Sargis, for being here. And one thing I wanted to tell you, and I didn't get a chance to tell you earlier, when it comes to Back the Blue, is that you guys can't see it because I'm wearing a black shirt, but this necklace was given to me by the League of St. Michael's, and you guys will probably never see this again because I always wear it underneath my shirt because I'm terrified someone's going to rip it off me when I'm out on site places. But I wear this every time that I go out, and Sargis is a member of the League of St. Michael's, which is it's amazing. They all ride by. Oh, Sargis, I'm getting all emotional. So you tell them about League of St. Michael's.
Well, I'm a patch wearing member of the Legion of St. Michael law enforcement community, and we have chapters even in Italy and all over the United States. And I'm as far as I know, still today, I've looked and I haven't seen. I'm the first commissioned officer in the U.S. military to ever be inducted in the Legion of St. Michael, not only, but like Legion of St. Michael organizations across the U.S. So, because law enforcement is important to me, that's why the Fraternal Order Police actually endorsed me, the Chicago Fraternal Order Police, I should say. And usually they don't do an endorsement at the federal level, but they did it because of all the work I've done with representing law enforcement. So I'm glad that you're wearing our colors, and it's been a pleasure. Like I said, I usually, for those who want to know, I'm pretty much reserved about what I say because they always say don't say something that's gonna hurt you election wise. But when it comes to Ashley, I'm open, and if somebody doesn't like what I said, whether it be from my party or the party, uh, when it comes to Ashley comes first. The two parties go pound sand. We'll take care of individuals like Ashley because of the type of work they do, especially when it comes to the 501c3 that you're running in support of law enforcement.
Thank you, Sargis. I really appreciate that. Everybody, go check Sargis out. He has got his Facebook page, Vote Sargis Sangari. I believe you also have your webpage still up as well, correct?
Yeah, it's Vote Sangari actually is www.votesangari.com, and you could go to the Facebook page again, votesangari.com, or the Facebook page. We're on Twitter also and Instagram. And look, get out there and vote, folks. If you want folks like me in Congress, you got to go vote. It costs you nothing. I know you got to get your friends to go to vote. Every day, get somebody to the polls. 75 million people have voted. Like I said, I'm running against a very heavily entrenched incumbent. I cannot guarantee anything, but I can guarantee one thing. If you vote me in, you'll have a good representative. If you don't vote me in, you're going to have the same mindsets that have really led to where our country is today for another 2 years. So I've done my job. I've gotten into this race. I need your support to get into the voting polls in the 9th Congressional District and vote. And with that said, thanks, Ashley, for having us. And let's hope you're victorious on 3 November.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. And again, please go check out Sargis's Facebook page, website, and please keep up with us about Philadelphia because, like I said, we're really going to try to make it there to help those officers that were injured. And everybody, have a great night. I will actually see you in about 30 minutes when we talk with Mark Curran. So see you guys shortly. Bye.